So you mentioned marketing. What's sort of your marketing stack, so to speak?
Yeah, we've tried to diversify it. That's been a big initiative for us recently. We grew a lot when things weren't in person through online marketing, SEO, website content. That world continues to change. I think it will never be the same as it was. And the acceleration of the change, I think, is really being driven by AI and how people find you. And so we have a new website we launched just beginning of this year, but we're looking at other ways to reach people digitally. And some of that's paid ads and social. Referral marketing, if I had to name one thing that really helped us kind of catapult to the next level, has been a big thing for us. And that could be, through a variety of different sources, client referrals, providers, attorneys. In our line of work, it really has to be a variety because people don't know who they need you until they need you. So it's not like estate planning, right? It's different.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. Looking forward to today's guest. We've got Kevin McManus with us today. He is a personal injury lawyer primarily in Kansas City, but he also has a long-term disability practice as well. And I think he's got more than one office and probably a number of attorneys. But Kevin, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. Why don't you introduce yourself, really tell us a little bit more about your firm.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Yeah, you've got that correct. Law firm I started about 6-7 years ago. We practice in two areas primarily. Most of what we do is personal injury related. We do have a practice area for long-term disability claims, ERISA claims, more of a niche practice. We are in both states, Missouri and Kansas. We have offices in Overland Park, Kansas, downtown Kansas City, Missouri, as well as Lee Summit, Missouri, a suburb of the city. We've got 16 folks on staff now, 4 attorneys, and just delighted to be here and, have a conversation with you. I've been a longtime listener. I've listened to several of your podcasts in the past. Know several folks who've been on here, so it's great to be here in person.
Well, I'm glad to have you. So first question that's interesting is, I'm not sure I've interviewed anybody that's on a border town. That's how I call it. So what is that like? Obviously, I guess you got to be licensed in both states. In terms of marketing and all of that, what's it like being on the border there?
Well, it's confusing when you talk to someone who's not from around here. So anybody who's not from here gets really confused about it. But for us, it's just natural. I'm born and raised here and grew up blocks from state line. Our law office, we can see both states from the windows behind me. So it's pretty natural for us. But yeah, there's obviously a Kansas City, Missouri, there's a Kansas City, Kansas, and then there's, just the general MSA is about 2 million people across both states. And so I guess a unique situation. I'm sure there's other situations somewhat similar in dealing with multiple municipalities, but with the state law differences, there are pretty substantial state law differences between the two states, and those affect how you handle cases in each state. Fortunately, all our attorneys were licensed in both states, and that's pretty common. But to me, there's nothing different, and it adds a little level of variety to what we do.
So how do you go about it? Do you take the bar exam in one state and then waive, or do you do 2 bar exams?
I took both. I guess I was masochistic in that regard. I think you can nowadays waive after a certain number of years, but not every lawyer in this area is going to be licensed in both. So that isn't something people just take for granted. But it doesn't stop people from trying to handle cases in both states, So I think, never been an issue for us. It's just something we're used to here. But yeah, I think attorneys will probably at this point in the world, I think they're waiving in after practicing in one state, they're waiving into the other.
So I'm in Atlanta. We're not on the border, but along the Georgia-Alabama border, the city's there. So you could practice in both, but then you've got the time zones. I mean, you could be literally an hour behind, within 10 minutes, you just crossed the state line. I guess you're all one time zone, right?
Yes. Yeah, we don't have that problem.
Yeah. So, well, cool. So take us back before you started your firm. I want to know, let's go back to the beginning. My understanding, maybe you started, I'll call it big law. Is that correct? Is that what you?
Yeah, right out of law school. I mean, I did what I think we were taught to do, which was pursue the most successful path, which was trying to get a job in big law. And I'm saying that in quotes because I now, like many of us, I think, understand that there's many different paths, and that's not the only path to success. In fact, like a lot of folks, that's not the right path for them. But I did do that, and I worked for a large corporate firm, nationwide firm that's had a large office here. Enjoyed it, learned a lot, but knew kind of that at the end of the day, it wasn't going to be a long-term fit for me. And so I think it was a good experience, but I also, the entire time I was there, essentially, I was kind of knew that there's probably something else, although I didn't know what that was.
So what did you do? What kind of work were you doing at the big firm? Litigate?
A variety, some corporate, some litigation, some class action defense. What was nice about it was it gave me the ability to try a lot of different things and to learn from some attorneys that were really, obviously their hourly rates were very high end, and I think they were doing high end work. So nothing but good things to say about kind of the quality of the legal experience or education that you get in a firm like that. But yeah, it was a variety.
Within big law, there's lots of different ways to go about it too. And I remember just, however many years ago now, I'd been out, I don't know, 10 years maybe. I'd done trials, done hundreds of depositions, and I was on a big case that had some big firms here in town, and there were people that were my year out of law school doing their first depositions. So what was your experience like? Were you able to get, frontline type experience quick, or were you sort of down the chain?
No, I got quite a bit of good experience pretty early on. I was only there 3 years though, and I'd say when I transitioned out of there and into a smaller to medium size firm, it really started changing, I think, the level of responsibility very quickly. I mean, I noticed a distinct shift in just the economics of it. Like, we're giving you this case and you're going to run with it, as well as you're taking all the depositions, you're developing the strategy, and you're going to try it, So it's like, that was a very distinct change. And I think at a larger firm, it wasn't my experience. I mean, it was much more like you're part of a team and there's quite a bit of oversight into what you're doing.
So what made you leave the big one?
Well, and let's see, 2009, I had this crazy idea that I had volunteered in the political world. I decided that there was an open seat in the Missouri legislature and I was going to run for it. And somebody told me at the time, like, the worst thing that could happen is you might win. And anyway, it started a long process, and I did actually end up winning. And that was a big reason why I had to leave that firm. But at the time, it's like anything, a door closes and really a new one opened, and there was just a huge amount of opportunity for me to do both the legislative work that I was doing, which was not a full year job. It was, we're in Jefferson City 5 months out of the year, and still be practicing law, at this medium-sized firm. So, and I was able to work my way up at that firm into a partner track situation. But then, the story goes that even then, I kind of knew I always wanted to transition to plaintiff's work, and how I ended up doing what I'm doing today.
Well, let's talk about your political career for a little bit. So I guess, did you have to go to the firm you're at and say, hey, I'm running? Did you have to get permission?
I did.
Get permission from them?
I did, and they did not want me to do that.
So well, you did it. So was that, sorry guys, I'm doing it anyway, see ya, or I'm doing it and we'll see what happens?
Yeah, no, I think it was, I think at any point in your life, you have to make your own decisions as to what you want your life to be like. And I distinctly remember having that conversation and then being told, like, there's no place for you here. That firm also heavily lobbied in the state capitol, and I think that probably impacted their decision. I was also told I was in the minority party, so my use was not maybe it's the highest quality use, because there were other people who had those double roles who they felt were more useful. And, you develop certain value sets as you go through these experiences. And for me, it was really educational on a lot of different levels. And it was difficult, it was a little scary, because I'd explain to my parents, and my wife, I'd just gotten married, that, this 6-figure job right out of law school wasn't going to be my career. Yeah. And there was some concern about that,
Yeah.
And not from me. That's the funny thing. I mean, I was probably a little concerned about this, but I think that's the beautiful thing about being in your 20s with relatively little responsibility. And so I always encourage people, if you're going to, like, we all are, I think, have to take certain risks in life, but it's a lot easier to do those sort of things when you don't have kids and you don't have a lot of obligations. And so for me, I was willing to just risk it.
Yeah, before we hit record, I was talking about, one time I thought I was interested in politics. So I took a sabbatical from my firm and I went and worked down at the Georgia legislature as counsel to the House Judiciary Committee, which was awesome. And in Georgia, it's typically a 3-month session, although that year was right after it was fallout from the great financial crisis. So they didn't want to have to pass the budget because it was just, a fraction of what it was the year before. So they're going to have to cut all this stuff and tick people off. So it kept punting, and it turned into like 4 months, which was like the longest it had ever been. My firm was like, are you coming back or not?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, so there were, a number of lawyer legislators, and I remember thinking, and some of them were from the outlying counties and pure solos. And we'd be in committee meetings, and they'd be on their laptop drafting briefs and, doing all this stuff. And it really hit me hard. I was like, it can be difficult, particularly if you're a solo, to be able to do both. So I don't know if you sort of ran into that. How did you handle it?
Oh, it was super hard. And, there's a lot of ways I could talk about that. And I know those guys. I know those people, men, women, who are the small firm lawyers doing both, legislator, lawyer. And look, we may disagree on a number of different things, but I have total respect for people who are able to balance that. And I think it's great that people are willing. It's a huge sacrifice, for someone to go away from their family, go serve. I can tell you're not doing it for the money, at least not in Missouri. I think the pay is like $30,000. And, you're away from your family. You're probably not going to be able to live on that salary, although some try to. I think it'd be very difficult. So you're trying to kind of, do this night work, basically, to keep things going. And so, but here's the great aspect of it is I think we've lost track of this, but I do think there's a very valuable thing to have lawyers in legislatures. And it doesn't really matter what your politics is. I think people who, A, read bills, is becoming more and more scarce, and B, can actually think critically about consequences, unintended or not, of that legislation. Extremely valuable. So I think it was shocking to me how little people actually knew what they were voting on. And the people I felt like I could always go to, and by the way, they're on both sides of the aisle, were some of my fellow attorneys. And we could kind of debate, hey, maybe we should change this word, or put a semicolon there. Small little things can make a big difference. And as lawyers, I think we all understand, you're trying to understand what the statute says or why it says this, who the hell wrote this and why. I can tell you it's not always well thought out, and things are passed at times and you're wondering, like, did anybody even pay attention to this? So that's a long way of answering it. I think for me, it gets me kind of into this transition of why I ended up on the plaintiff side, because that medium-sized firm primarily was doing defense work. They didn't represent a lot of auto insurance companies or traditional kind of insurance companies that you may encounter in my current line of work. So I was able to say to them, hey, I'd like to start trying to bring in some plaintiffs' cases. And because of our relationship, they were willing to let me bring in some PI cases because there weren't conflicts. And I just was fascinated by the clients I was getting, even though they were small cases. I was fascinated by the stories. And here's the kicker. I was able to generate revenue without billing hours, which for me was like a major leverage point because I had another job that was also, taking up my time. And so a light bulb kind of went off, is like, what if there was a way to structure this so that, I was able to basically maximize my time better and get more results and have the revenue being driven by the results and not by the hours I billed. So it kind of, that issue that I was dealing with or grappling with not much time actually was another reason why it kind of led me into the line of work I'm in.
Yeah, interesting. And I agree with you. Number one, it's a sacrifice. People think that, that at least on the state level, that the legislators are these fat cats or whatever. But I mean, it's a sacrifice, especially if you're self-employed and your line of work is dependent on the amount of time you put into it, like billing hours. And so in Georgia either, aren't many of the legislators that are lawyers. And I saw the same thing. It's just like, you felt like there were some bozos passing stuff. They didn't know what it was.
Right. Right.
It was interesting. So I was on I was sort of in the House Judiciary Committee, and that's where the meaty bills did happen to go there. That's where all the lawyers were on that committee. So that one
Yep.
was, we saw some really meaty stuff. But all right, so the light bulb goes off. Maybe you were interested in the plaintiff's work already, but the light bulb goes off that, hey, maybe it's not dependent on hours and billing. Maybe this is something I can do. And so you started that at your other firm, and you're still at the legislature. What was the timing of you leaving that firm to start your own? And were you still elected official, or what was the timing around all that?
So I'm trying to remember because it's a little bit of a blur, but I think what happens is I have a child with my wife, and I decide that I don't really want to go to Jeff City. This is a bigger commitment now, but there's a bigger commitment at home that I want to be a part of. And it was a major, anybody who's had a child knows that first one, especially, you're just like, it's life-changing. You're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. So we had our first son, and I knew I had to eventually make a change. And so I ended up leaving the legislature. I ran for the city council here in Kansas City, and I won that election in 2015. After serving, I was elected 3 times in the legislature, left there, then served 2 terms in the city council. And at that point, that's when I was transitioning to a medium-sized firm and starting to do PI work. And then as I termed off the city council, I knew I would have a lot more time, that it was worth taking the leap and trying to start my own firm. And so that essentially started in about 2019, 2020. And so we're, about approaching 6 years really of doing what started as a solo project for me. It started as a solo project going into COVID, nonetheless, which was, a crazy time in and of itself. But that's really the path it took. It was not an overnight thing for me, though. It's just like everything in my life. It's been just like decisions are made, but it's incremental, So that's why it's sometimes hard to remember exactly how this all happened. But
well, the decision to leave and start your own firm, that is, you're taking a leap there. So, what was it that sort of pushed you off and said, all right, I'm doing it?
I think, it's always, a couple things. One, my father was a defense attorney and then transitioned into the plaintiff side and had a solo practice, and he was retiring at the same time I was contemplating this. And I saw what he was able to even accomplish as a solo attorney. It was kind of inspirational to me. I was like, and I think at the end of the day, if I had one thing, it's certainly not about money. I think it's about freedom and control. And for me, like the idea of being able to control who my clients were, what kind of practice I had, how we did the work we did, and to have the freedom to decide the future of the organization was just something I felt like I had to try. All these decisions were difficult to make at the time, and now it seems kind of obvious, but it is scary. To say you're going to take the leap, you're going to sign the checks, and how am I possibly going to do all these different things? But it's still, some elements of that are even today, but you just do what's in front of you. And for me, what was in front of me was I just felt like I needed to give this a shot to know whether or not I can make it work.
So here's a question that, I encounter a lot in my line of work. But so what was the conversation like when you go to your firm and say, hey, I'm leaving? Were you a partner?
Yeah, I just been made a partner. I just told them, look, I was doing a small amount of plaintiff's firm work and I wanted to do 100%. And I just felt like there wasn't going to be, that our paths were diverging and that they were never going to be able to fully be in alignment. The interesting and kind of crazy thing is that firm actually went out of existence about 2 years later, and unrelated to me leaving, but they had older partners who were all kind of retiring. And I think we see that. That's not like a knock on them. It's just, that's what happens in our industry is, firms come and go, particularly in the smaller to mid-size level. And if you don't have kind of that bench to bring them up, it becomes very difficult. So, but for me, it was I just knew that the paths weren't really in alignment, and the conversation was not difficult. It was very easy because it was kind of clear, I guess, at that point.
Yeah. It's interesting. So I have my theory on the lifespan of a firm, or the max lifespan of a firm, is 35 years or within 5 years of the last founder leaving for whatever sort of there are exceptions, but that's sort of, especially in the smaller firm. And so you see it a lot. So it sounds like you sort of good timing on your part, other than COVID.
Yeah. For me, COVID was in a way a weird blessing. And I know that sounds crazy, but what it made acceptable was the ability to grow virtually. And that was a huge opportunity for me early because I didn't want to bring in, I was scared to death to hire employees and to spend money. But at that point in time, it was like, where will you put them anyway? So I had a small solo office. I was on a floor with another plaintiff's firm that was much larger, much more impressive. But I was able to grow a virtual staff through COVID as we grew at a much more affordable rate with less overhead. And it wasn't weird to clients because nobody was meeting in person. And it forced me at the time to really invest the savings in technology and put money into the best software, the best systems, the best cloud, everything so that the experience virtually could be top notch for the client. And that's something we still have as like a value of what we do today.
That's cool. So tell me, what's your setup in terms of virtual, I'm sure you have some VAs, maybe overseas VAs, but what about your attorneys? I mean, you're hybrid. What's your setup?
So we have one attorney that is pretty much 100% virtual, but the other 3 are in person. We are in total, like I said, 16 people. And so I think we've got 12 US, and then our legal assistants, with the exception of one, are all virtual and near shore. We have one in Mexico, one in Argentina, one in Peru, and one in the Philippines as my executive assistants in the Philippines. So we've got a mixture, but everything's in the cloud and we have a way to communicate seamlessly to each other that it's not weird. And it's kind of been part of our culture since the beginning. So it's worked well.
Culture. So I do want to talk about that. So I came across, you had a post on LinkedIn about culture that I thought was really cool. So I want to ask you, sort of your approach to culture, but especially since you've got these virtual components, because that is, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like it's a little more challenging to create sort of a good feel when people are virtual, not there. So how do you approach it?
No, it's huge. Well, we're running on EOS and we have an implementer who's local and we have a leadership team that meets regularly. And then we have, full team meetings. We just did our quarterly state of the company just this week, our most recent one. We are talking about our values and our culture all the time. So it's just something, someone told me if you really want to instill those things, you got to live it. And that's just the way, like me, I have to embody that to the best I can. And so I take that really, that's something I take personally. I kind of think of myself as director of culture, director of values, along with other things. The things we do with our people who are offshore are a variety of things. We developed a new client gift care package and we ship them all over the world. We sent one to every single one of our VAs. We paid all the tariffs, not to go down that rabbit hole, but we send, we have virtual firm meetings that we have the technology to make people feel like they're all here together, which requires a lot of cameras and setups and mics, but we are able to do that. We have regular team meetings with everybody. Our tech is pretty, I think allows us to do a lot with that. Now, are they in the coffee room? No, they're not. So you've got to find other ways. We've done a holiday dinner where we actually rented out a room at a local restaurant and got a big screen in there and had all of our people from throughout the world eating with us, and we paid for their meals too. And nice. So you just have to be creative about it, but there's ways to accomplish it. And I just think the talent that you're able to get throughout the world is incredible, and you're sleeping on it if you're not exploring it. We've had I just think really incredible, valuable team members who are not here make great contributions to the firm. They get massive numbers of reviews from clients because they're just like, we try to overstaff our cases so the clients are just like being communicated to a lot. And I feel like it would be difficult to do that financially if it was all just US based. It gives us, I think, a leverage point. I've even gone and I think you know this, I've traveled to South America and I actually met with one of our VAs in Argentina and had lunch with her. And so that was cool. But anyway, I think it's definitely possible. Is it for everybody? It's up to, I guess, each person has to decide that. But for us, it's worked really well.
Okay, so here's a question about culture. So, you work so hard to create the culture, maintain the culture, all that stuff, and then you need to grow your team. And so you're going to be adding new people into the mix, which is always, you never know how that's going to work out. And, you hear people in sort of the hiring approach. Some people say, hire for culture, hire for potential, or hire for experience or whatever. So how do you balance the bringing in new team members into your existing culture, and how do you get them into the fold?
Yeah, I think hiring for culture is huge. I do believe in hiring for that as a filter before almost anything else. I mean, clearly if let's say if it's a specific skill, you're needing like a high stakes litigator, like obviously that's important. But for me, it doesn't matter how great a litigator are if you're a complete jerk. We just won't work well together. You'll cause more problems in our firm than it's worth. And I think many of your listeners probably have been at firms where they have someone who's very productive and, good at their job, so to speak, but terrible with people and a real cancer on the culture in the firm. And it's not worth it. It's just absolutely, in my mind, not worth it. So that's a filter for us. And we start with it early. So even in the interview process, every single applicant, the job ad, as well as the interview process, we're posting our values as part of that as a filter. And we have several levels of how we handle the job interviews. So there's always multiple levels, and they're usually being talked to about the values early and often. But at the end of the day, it's really hard. I mean, how do you really know until you get somebody in the door? And so you've got to make a leap of faith, I think, with people based on, what you find out in the interview process, as aggressive as you can be, and then have a really strong onboarding process that allows your team to integrate with them quickly. And again, to be in reinforcing that culture. And I have regular check-ins. We hired 4 people in our firm of 16, which is a huge amount, in the last 45 days. And so we just went through a massive kind of, for us,
Wow.
For a larger firm, that's no big deal. But for us, it was you feel that from a percentage standpoint. And we're still going through it, but it's gone really well. And I really think the reason is because we took our time and really pushed the culture first.
Yeah, that's a big percentage increase all at once, pretty much. Yeah, impressive. Real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. So you mentioned, I know a lot of folks that are on it. How long have you been on it? And, people tell me that, it's just like night and day or hockey stick after they've implemented it. What's been your experience? How long have you been doing it? And
we are in our second year. And I don't think it's a full 2 years. We're probably approaching a full 2 years. When we started, when I first inquired about it, it would have been, I think, October. It would have been like October 2020. So probably about 16 months. And I remember we had 9 people, because I remember someone told me EOS is for companies with 10 or more people, or, if you Google it, that's what it says. And I was like, well, maybe we don't need it yet. And so I started talking to people. Of course, everybody who's part of EOS will tell you, oh, no, you need it. But so, that made me kind of wonder, well, maybe this is just a sales thing. Maybe this is a gimmick. But as I started educating myself about the system, about the way they approach the team building aspect and getting people in alignment and the metrics, I started realizing that it's been great for us because it takes a little bit of the pressure off the founder, right? It starts pushing it out through the organization. Doesn't mean that my job's easy, but it means that the burden is shared and communicated, right? So that people understand where we're trying to go. And what we found is they're either accepting that or they're selecting out of it. And fortunately, we've had really strong selecting it. But for us, it's been a great thing. And it's an investment. I mean, to pay an implementer, we don't self-implement. We're paying somebody, but it's worked really well for us so far.
So I've talked to a ton of people who've done it, but they've never said what you just said. And I think that really, really hit hard for me when you said it takes the burden off the founder a little bit and pushes it out. I think that's cool right there.
Yeah, and I didn't expect that, but I felt it palpably. It's like, because anybody who starts a business is going to bed and all they're doing is thinking about the business. I mean, is it every night? Probably not, but it's almost every night I'm thinking about it, And so I'm not saying I'm not doing that anymore. I'm saying though that I feel better because I've communicated. There's a mechanism, a framework for us to communicate issues, metrics, process, our people, and we're able to communicate these elements of the business out, frankly, first to a leadership team, but even in our state of the company, I'm sharing way more information I never thought I would with our entire team at every level. And there's something cathartic about it, but there's also something about the power that comes with that, because what I've noticed is it starts coming back to me through our team with ideas, with ways that they want to help push the needle further so that we can achieve our goal. So I think that's what really makes it powerful, is it allows this team to kind of really focus around a central vision and get in alignment.
I like the way you've said it, man. You may have said it better than anybody I've ever heard say it. That's really cool.
I'm not being paid by US, I promise.
But, I feel this, I've been feeling this recently. It's just as a founder of a firm, and I love it. I mean, it's fun. I wouldn't want to do anything else, but it feels lonely sometimes. And it's like it's all in your head, and how do you get it out, and, how do you get, it'd be nice to have a team around you to really help push the boulder up the hill. And it sounds like EOS is a good way to do that. So.
And here's what's great is once you decide on your 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goal, whatever it is, when you're talking to your team, it's not about Jonathan being the bad guy saying, hey, this is where we're headed and I need you guys to help out more. Instead, this is where the firm, and specifically the leadership team, has told me, the founder, that we need to go. This isn't just coming from me. This is now the firm. This entity is telling me, and I have an obligation to do what I've been told to do, just like you all do. And, we've all decided this is where we're going. And so it's just, I think it's a powerful way of communicating that, because it's no longer just about you, and really that's the way ultimately we have to escape the wake up in the middle of the night, is to make this business not just about ourselves. It has to be about building a really good team that can function without us.
Yeah. And I always tell people, the less your firm or your business depends on you, the more valuable it is. So we should all be working towards that. So a minute ago, you mentioned traveling down to South America. I really want to talk about that. I saw you did a LinkedIn post on that as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you took 3 months and went with your whole family down to Paraguay, left your firm and went down there. So what was that like? So, there's so much there, but first, just preparing for that. Well, number one, deciding to do it, then for that, and then being there and actually seeing what happened. So how did all that go down, man?
Yeah. So kind of give you a little background. It didn't come out of nowhere. So my wife, her family is from Paraguay originally. They live in the United States. They're U.S. citizens, and she was born in the United States, but they have a lot of family in Paraguay. And I've been to Paraguay with them several times. My wife, when she was a child, she went there so much that she stayed there for a prolonged time, kind of like this, and went to school there. Their school schedule is different, so that the summer here is actually winter there, and so schools are still in session while our kids are off. And so it was something I think important to her, that our kids saw a different culture, that they were put in an environment where they were, immersed in a different language, where they were able to see and meet relatives of hers that, otherwise they wouldn't possibly meet. And so, something important to her. So bottom line is, she's like, we're doing this. And so me being a supportive husband said, okay, great, let's figure this out. How are we going to do this? And was there trepidation? Yeah, there was quite a bit. We're growing fast. We're busy. I'm busy. My Spanish isn't that great. My kids' Spanish isn't that great. Where are we going to live? Where are they going to go to school? But I think I put in that post, it's occurred to me throughout life that a lot of the worst case scenario things that come up in my head, maybe not anybody else's, but in my head, they come up, don't actually end up happening, but they become impediments to action. And this situation is a great example of that. I had all these things. I was like, this is going to go terribly wrong. And we got there and it was totally fine. Our kids went to a school. That was the funniest thing, is we picked them up and we're in May 2025 right now, but it was May of 2024. We pick them up the last day of school and we're like, okay, we're packing up and we're going to go and you're going to start going to Sunday school.
What happened to our summer, Dad? What?
Right. So there was, I think if anything, there was consternation over that. But
So real quick, how old are your kids?
I have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And they were, I guess, 10 and 8 at that point. Yeah. So
Yeah.
they went to the school that, fortunately, this school, we didn't throw them in a school that was like totally 100% Spanish. It was half English, like half of the day was English, half the day was Spanish. But, I'm so proud of them because like to walk them in to a place they didn't know anybody and they didn't speak the language. And, we'd only even been in the country for like a week, or less than a week before we dropped them off. I just remember walking out of there being like, I don't know how I would have dealt with that, but kids are so resilient. It's just crazy. And so when my 8-year-old came out of there, he's like, I've got 4 friends and they're all named Pablo. And I'm like, that's amazing, And they're both really into soccer. And they were like, my 8-year-old was also like, I saw a kid head a goal off a corner kick. We're not even allowed to head balls, And I'm like, yeah, well, you're in South America now, man. That's how they play soccer here. So, it was a great experience for them. I worked the same schedule I work here, just remotely. Before I left, I told one of our VAs in Argentina, I said, I'm really nervous about this. And she said, Kevin, I've been doing this for 3 years for you. It's not a big deal. Like, you'll figure it out. And fortunately, we have a great in-person team that, to the extent things were needed in person, were able to handle it for me. So it was a mixture of ways that we, could make it work, but it was a great experience.
That's cool. And I hope, one day your kids will, when they're a little bit older, they're going to really appreciate that experience. Now, if they had been,
I think so too.
If they were 15 or 16, they'd have been pissed off. Leave it at that.
Yeah. I think it's also like, not to get too far off the track here, but for them to see how other parts of the world live, and particular, places where, Paraguay is one of the, if not the most poorest country in South America, it's one of the poorest. I think Bolivia might be above it, or in terms of poverty. But you see things that we, in the U.S., we think things are, in a tough spot, but you see things there at just a different level. But you still see people amazingly happy, given very, limited means. And I think that gives you a unique perspective. I hope it makes them, I don't know, my hope is that, help make all of us a little bit more grateful about what we have, and kind of inspires them to take advantage of the opportunities they were given, not take them for granted.
So back to the prep to go. So let's talk about prepping your firm. What sort of things did you do? I mean, did you do some test runs and you left for a week here and maybe left for a week there to sort of see if there were any systems that would break, or did you just cold turkey, I'm gone for 3 months?
I mean, I had taken a week off before, and so yeah, there were some test runs, I guess, but I don't know how you really test run that. Yeah. It's at some point you're just going to do it and they're going to figure it out. And I think that's actually the lesson in all this, is that at some point your team needs to step up, and they will. If you've gotten the right team on board, they will figure it out. And it's incredibly empowering to them. And by the way, I work a lot. I was always accessible if there were issues. So it wasn't like they were completely, alone with dealing with things. But yeah, it wasn't as big a deal as I thought it would be, to be honest.
That's cool. So did anything break?
No, we had our best 3 months that we had in 2024 when I was gone. We won our largest LTD appeal in the history of our firm, and I was the primary attorney responsible for that. So that was like really cool to call the client and share that news. We really had no issues. So maybe we just got lucky. I don't know.
Well, maybe one of the lessons here is you had your best 3 months ever. You need to do this more often.
Yeah, maybe, but we're not going to do it this year.
So I'm curious, you've done it. Any advice? This has been a dream of mine. My kids are in high school now, so no way I could do it now. Maybe in a summer, maybe. I tried to convince my kids to go to Spain. I was telling my wife we should go to Spain this summer, and she's like, I don't know. She mentioned it to the kids, and they're like, we don't want to go. I was like, great. That was just for like 2 weeks. I can't imagine going to them saying, all right, guys, we're leaving for 3 months. So for me, it's going to be a while. But that aside, so if anybody out there that may want to do something like this, do you have any advice?
Well, for me, a huge leverage point was the fact that I was on a similar time zone. I was basically on East Coast time, and so I was an hour ahead. So I was already working before many of my team were even at work, you know. So I think it would be harder. I mean, I would love to do that in Spain. I think Spain's a beautiful country. But I think the time zone difference might, you know, make it a little bit more challenging. Like you'd have to figure out a way to navigate that. So I think, that might be one thing to flag. But other than that, no. I mean, it's really about, I think, having documented processes and making sure your team is really clear about what that process is and just being super diligent about how to delegate things. I mean, those are not unique skills. Like those are things that are kind of like business 101. Like you need to know how to do these things to grow a business, but they become really important when you're remote, particularly anything in person. But no, other than that, I mean, like I said, it just wasn't as big a deal as I thought. I don't think we're going to be doing this again anytime soon. Although when we were coming home, my wife was like already, well, what's the next?
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that came out of it that was cool is I'm still working with a woman who works at U.S. Embassy there. We do lessons twice a week in Spanish. So I'm still working on my Spanish. And we serve about 15 to 20% of our clients who really have some level of Spanish. Some of them are exclusively Spanish speaking clients. So that to me has been interesting and helpful.
So where would you grade yourself? Proficient?
Not, I would say proficient, need to work more on, when people are speaking very quickly, it becomes very difficult for me. And then the main thing we're working on, I can read very well. I think the main thing is just comfort level and, dealing with conversant Spanish as well as just different slangs and dialects. Like there's so many different, the way they speak in Paraguay is actually quite different and using different words and tenses than folks who are of Mexican descent. So it's interesting to me, like, the differences. But I find it, look, I don't know that I'm ever going to be completely fluent. My goal would be to make a lot of progress in that. But I was telling somebody this recently. If anything, it forces me to use a part of my brain that we don't otherwise use. And in particular, that skill of being a beginner and being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and like doing things that are like, that I might sound like an idiot and just being comfortable with that.
Yeah.
I think that to me is, some people cold plunge. This is my cold plunge.
Yeah. After college, I moved to Costa Rica and did sort of, lived down there for 3.5 months and, did some immersion programs, and I had no Spanish. So I went down there pretty much cold. I think I studied for a week, got on the plane, was looking at a book, listened to some tapes. And it was interesting, sort of the progress. At first, it's like you hear it and you translate in your brain. You're translating both ways, right? English, Spanish, English. But then it got to a point where it was just going directly in and out Spanish.
Yes.
Which was kind of cool. And then eventually you're sort of maybe dreaming a little bit in Spanish.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've forgotten it all. But at the time I was, you could drop me anywhere and I could get by.
That's cool.
And I remember the other thing I remember too is when I didn't know a word, I would speak very slowly in English with a Spanish accent. Thinking maybe that would work, but yeah.
Right.
Well, that's really cool. So shifted gears. So, you've been at this, I don't know what, 5-6 years now. How is your role in the firm in terms of, your day-to-day, like moving from doing the technician stuff to this stuff? How has that maybe changed over time, and what's a day like for you now?
It's less technician than it used to be, and quite a bit less. I still really enjoy it and miss it. And it's something I kind of struggle with, to be honest. I was talking to another attorney about this recently, about how I still insert myself in cases and I still want to be involved in cases. And I don't know that I'll ever fully give that up, but I think it's really hard as you grow to do it all. It's just, so more of my time now is on management, and we don't have a real COO of any sort. So I'm kind of sitting in that chair, as well as I guess in EOS parlance, it's the visionary integrator. Like I'm essentially doing both. And that will eventually become an issue, I think, for us. So it's something I'm aware of. But yeah, it's less the technician for sure. And, I still love what I get to do. I love building our team and being a part of the growth of the firm. I get really excited about marketing and, the things we can do to improve the client experience. Those are where I probably spend most of my time right now, is really honing in on those two things. But every day is a little different, to be honest. So I wish I could tell you exactly what a day's like. It's different every day.
Sort of the fun part. So you mentioned marketing. What sorts of things, what's sort of your marketing stack, so to speak?
Yeah, we've tried to diversify it. That's been a big initiative for us recently. We grew a lot when things weren't in person through online marketing, SEO, website content. That world continues to change. I think it will never be the same as it was. And the acceleration of the change, I think, is really being driven by AI and how people find you. And so we have a new website we launched just beginning of this year, but we're looking at other ways to reach people digitally. And some of that's paid ads and social. Referral marketing, if I had to name one thing that really helped us kind of catapult to the next level, has been a big thing for us. And that could be, through a variety of different sources: client referrals, providers, attorneys. In our line of work, it really has to be a variety, because people don't know who they need you until they need you. So it's not like estate planning, right? It's different. So the way you stay top of mind has to be, you have to use a variety of methods to do that. And so we've really diversified in that respect as well.
So curious, your time as a political figure, does that help at all?
No.
I mean, just
I
being out there, giving all the speeches, campaigning, all that. People, I would feel like a lot of people know you, know your name.
I don't know. I don't know that it does. And because I was talking to somebody about that not that long ago, and I struggled with that for a while, because I was like, I spent this much time in this arena, and was that all time wasted? I don't think it was. I don't know that it is. No, I know it wasn't wasted, because I feel like I had a great impact on what I was doing, but I don't feel like it led directly to clients, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so if someone said to me, "Hey, I'm running for office to enhance my law firm career," I'd probably tell you, that's not a good idea. That would probably be my response. I do think there's some soft skills that I developed through that experience, and dealing with people, understanding how to read people, understand how to negotiate with people, deal with upset people, walk into a room full of angry people. Those are things that were very commonly done in that position. And I think that's extremely valuable in life. And in particular, it can be valuable in the personal injury law firm space, because we're dealing with people with emotions every day. We're dealing with people who are difficult on the adjuster side, on the client side, whoever. There's people who are taking positions that we have to navigate. And for me, that kind of soft skill has been, I feel really comfortable in that environment, actually. And it's, I think, been a big part of why our firm has grown like it has. Not necessarily like name ID, getting clients, but in how we handle cases and move things forward.
That's an interesting perspective. I remember many years ago, I've always been interested in marketing and business development. And I remember many years ago, I was still an associate at my firm, and I was just like, I got to get my name out there. And I had this harebrained idea that I would throw my name in a hat for a court of appeals position and just run for judge, knowing I wasn't going to win. I was, they had other older people, more established. And I had this idea that it would just get out there. And I remember I talked to somebody about it, and he said, that's the dumbest thing in the world. He said, and he had done it. He had actually run for a court of appeals. And he said the opposite happened. He said no one sent him any cases, because they're like, well, you're going to be a judge. So they sent him zero. I was like, okay, that's the dumbest thing in the world.
Yeah, it's like, what are you known for, right? It's not just that they know your name, it's what are you known for? And if you're known for that, that makes sense, right? And if I was known for being in the legislature or city council, doesn't mean that I can handle a wrongful death case for your aunt, so I do think, I have gotten cases through people who knew me through this other life, but it was because we had, I think, more of a personal relationship where they knew me very well, and I think that is know, like, and trust, right? Or the three keys to marketing. And I think anybody can do that without running for office. You don't need to run for office to be known, liked, and trust. And the baggage that you have to carry around if you win the election is severe. So, it's like one of those things, be careful what you wish for. You might get it, right?
Well, shoot. I mean, we talked about this offline too. Nowadays, to run for office, you're going to piss off half the people And not just, I disagree with you, I'm going to hate you. So,
Yeah.
so it's,
No, yeah, there's a part of
yeah.
that too. Yeah, you have to take into account.
Maybe you could run for a extremely local, nonpartisan type race, but that might be even worse. I've always told people, no offense from anybody out there that may be on it, but like a local school board would be like the worst position ever, because people get so fired up about their kids' education. It's like you talk about walking into an angry room, right?
No, I mean, I can tell you, like, because I've been at the state level and local, that I felt like the closer, like, yeah, I mean, deal with more stuff and you're more accessible, right or wrong, to whoever. I mean, I had people show up at my house with trash saying they wanted me to take it. And my wife's like it was one woman, but still, it's a little alarming.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be a thankless job, honestly. And I think school board, no doubt, is a difficult one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you've been at this law firm building thing for 6-7 years now. As you look back on it, if you were talking to your pre-law firm or pre-founder person, or maybe somebody out there that's thinking about it, what kind of advice would you give somebody?
Things you might think are a problem they're not the real problem. Like, I don't know, like I feel like I came up with a lot of issues like, where's my office going to be? Who's going to help me? Or how am I ever going to do the law and also bookkeep, or manage the technology? Like, those things are not hard. The key is to find good people to help you with those things, right? And the hardest part is knowing where your value is and putting your attention, your focus, your time in what you're best at, and outsourcing and delegating the rest, and not being afraid to spend some money to do that. And that can be scary, but I felt like, again, I mean, I just told you we brought in 4 new people. We're still onboarding them. Like, that's scary, but I know, because I believe in our firm, that it's going to be okay. I feel confident we got the right people who are going to help take us to the next level, and it's going to work out. It's going to expand our capacity to do good work. And that in turn is going to expand the impact we have and ultimately the bottom line at the firm, right? So initially, though, it's a scary thing to be spending money, when you're starting out. So you got to, to answer your question, I think I would be more apt to invest in things judiciously that will help us expand our capacity earlier and not be trying to just do everything myself.
Yeah. So you've got 3 offices, a handful of attorneys. You've been at it for a while now. As you look forward, I'm your EOS guy. You got to come tell me what your vision is, your 10-year vision, or maybe even your 20-year vision. Where do you want this thing to go?
Yeah, I think we're competing with ourselves. So I don't really look at us as like, hey, we want to be, dominating this market. We want to be, in my mind, like the best version of our firm. And for us, like the best version to grow. I could see us increasing our impact and our revenue. We have a revenue number that's big and bold. We want to grow our team. But I think the biggest thing for me is we don't want to sacrifice quality to do that, And so for us, it's not about necessarily increasing the quantity of cases. I think that's part of it. But it's really important for me that we're increasing the quality of the outcomes. And that's measured in a lot of different ways. So our EOS mission is not just to get a client a big check. Our EOS purpose is to help our clients achieve a maximum recovery, and that's financial, medical, lifestyle, everything, as well as to build a better life. And so our purpose, and I think it sounds obvious, but it's really important to remind ourselves that we're here to provide a value. And I feel like that's beyond just a check from the guys that you see on TV. And I feel like if we can really hone that in, we can distinguish ourselves. And that's our leverage point in our very competitive market. So right now, I'm going on a tangent here, but we're reading as a firm Unreasonable Hospitality. Mm-hmm. And we're incorporating elements into our client experience that we are basically taking from that book. And I think it's really important to do things like that because, look, we're not in the restaurant industry, but we are in the service industry. And we have to distinguish ourselves from our competition. And one way to do that is to do things that are absolutely unreasonable, that they wouldn't otherwise expect. And so that's part of our EOS mission. So I can see us, we have as part of our thing is to get another office. We want to expand the Hispanic market. We do want more clients and to continue growing, but we're not growing just to grow for growth's sake. We're really trying to grow for quality. And quality for me is like quality of life, quality of outcomes, and quality of impact.
Well, that's a good way to end it. I like that. That's the way to do it. So thanks, Kevin, for coming on. This has been real fun. Been fun to hear about your story and hear about Paraguay. And when you spend 6 months down there, you can come back and tell us about that. But for people out there that want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Kevin McManus Law, Kevin, McManus, McManus law.com is our website. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, the socials. Or my email is just my name, Kevin@kevinmcmanuslaw.com.
And been putting out some good LinkedIn content, so I encourage everybody to go.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Go follow you there.
I've met a lot of great people, including yourself. So it's been great. It's great to talk to you in person.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.